Barber County is a region unlike any other in Kansas. It's a region that's as rich in history as it is scenic splendor. A region in which the indigenous peoples of the southern plains would hunt, and where bison still roam today. A region where pioneers suffered countless adversities and spawned a community that still honors that heritage. A region that is rugged and wild. And a region that retains its rugged beauty no matter the season. Come with me on a tour through the hills that shaped history, the Medicine Hills. Having been raised on an island in Florida only a half-mile wide by 6 miles long, I've always been impressed with the expanse of land in Kansas, but always most impressed with Barber County and the Gypsum Hills. It's such a truly unique place in Kansas, with its deep canyons, buttes, and mesa topography. The region is rugged and remote, and its close proximity to Wichita always made the perfect retreat from noisy city life. On my numerous excursions to the hills, I've often looked out across the expanse and wondered, who were the people here before westward expansion? Who were the pioneers who came to this part of the frontier, and why? And most importantly, who is here today and what did they do? Through research and new friendships, I've collected stories that answer those questions. And that's what I'd like to share with you in this video. But first, let's talk about the land itself. Barber County is located in south-central Kansas along the Oklahoma border and encompasses a large portion of the Red Hills physiographic region. The area is well watered for a western Kansas region, and the main drainage takes place in the Medicine River, Elm Creek, and the Salt Fork of the Arkansas River in the southwest. Water is one of the factors that brought people to this area. The Kiowa would build sweat lodges along the Medicine River and use the water for its high mineral content, which gave it medicinal properties. The town Medicine Lodge is located near the site of one of those old Kiowa lodges, and is also historically known for being the location of a major peace treaty that involved a variety of tribes and the United States government. As you head west out of Medicine Lodge on Highway 160, you're suddenly transported to another world. There are a treasure trove of landmarks to discover along Highway 160, also known as the Gypsum Hills Scenic Byway. One of the first major historic landmarks is just southwest of Medicine Lodge, and it's called Jackass Canyon. On April 30th, 1884, Henry Newton Brown, a marshal from Caldwell, and a small group of outlaws attempted to rob the Medicine Valley Bank. The robbery was unsuccessful, and the bank's president and chief cashier were murdered in the process.
Marshal deputy from Caldwell, of all people, rode over here to rob the bank, and they picked up, I think, 3 more.
They decided that they would run over to Medicine Lodge because our bank happened to have a little wad of cash in it because of the cattle pools, and there was the roundup activity, and so there was a lot of money changing hands. But they did not count on Kansas weather. Normally being hot, dry, they came to Medicine Lodge when it was pouring down rain, and the robbery went wrong. They
walked in there, and the president lunged for the vault, and they shot and killed both of them. They didn't get any money.
They took out going south, and what their intentions was to go straight out through the passage that basically is 160 highway now. That was really the only passage through the hills.
As fate would have it, a homesteader erected the first barbed wire fence in the region the day before, forcing the outlaws to detour to the south. They were planning to take a long canyon straight to the gap, but mistakenly entered a box canyon to the north that cut off their escape.
A posse was formed, and they changed them out to Box Canyon, and it was raining, and they got cornered in there and couldn't get out.
There's no way out, and you cannot climb those hills, and the posse had them trapped rather quickly. They tried to hold up in there, and they told them they were going to dump barrels of burning kerosene off the side of the canyons and burned them out of there. And they finally gave up, and they came out and they brought them back to town.
So they brought them, put them in jail, really across from the bank, and then the townspeople were pretty upset that they killed the president and cashier, so they broke them out of jail and then took them a couple of blocks east of Kansas and Maine and hung them.
Marshall Brown went out game. They cut him down with a shotgun. He would not be hung.
So the coroner's reported they came to their death at hands unknown. So that ended that. So our bank's not been robbed since.
Kansas did not have the death penalty during that time, and lynchings were kind of rare, and so it kind of went down in history as one of the things that we were famous for. Apparently people just didn't believe that justice was going to get served, so they served it up themselves.
Further to the west and past the eastern escarpment of the Gypsum Hills is the next landmark on our tour, Flower Pot Mountain. This butte sits roughly 150 feet above the valley floor and resembles an upside-down flower pot. Located a short distance from Flower Pot Mountain and visible from Highway 160 is the landmark known as Twin Peaks, which is a prominence with two identical peaks on its summit. To the west, near Sun City, we find the remains of our next location, Natural Bridge. This natural bridge spanned 50 feet over Bear Creek and was once a spot where people would often visit for picnics. Sadly, the formation collapsed in the 1970s.
Natural Bridge, I've heard so many different stories on that. My folks, when they were dating in the 50s, went out to the Natural Bridge, and I remember a sign on 160 Highway when I was a kid at Sun City, and there was a sign that said Natural Bridge. The Natural Bridge was one of the geological highlights of the state, and there are people from all over the state that came out to have picnics and to see the Natural Bridge. And but it's collapsed now, and it is on private property, and the owners really don't want people on there without permission. So
There's two schools of thought, one that it fell down and one that the landowner blew it up because he was tired of people coming out there and camping out. But so I never saw it for real because it was gone.
Now that you're familiar with the land, let's turn our attention to the people who lived here, died here, and made history here. I was born upon the prairie, where the wind blew free and there was nothing to break the light of the sun. I was born where there were no enclosures, and where everything drew a free breath. I know every stream and every wood between the Rio Grande and the Arkansas. I have hunted over that country. I lived like my fathers before me, and like them, I lived happily. 10 Bears, Comanche Chief. Before white settlement, Barber County was a part of sacred hunting grounds utilized by communities of nomadic peoples that routinely migrated in pursuit of vast herds of bison across the southern plains. Eugene Stumbling Bear, descendant of Kiowa Chief Stumbling Bear, also known as Setumkia, tells us a little bit about what life was like during these times.
My name is Eugene Stumbling Bear, and I'm a full-blooded Kiowa Indian, and I was born and raised here in Wichita, Kansas. And as far as the peace treaty, my great-grandfather was one of the signers. Chief Stumbling Bear, in the Kiowa language, it's Setumkia, is how you pronounce Stumbling Bear. You know, at that time, buffalo was all over Kansas, and the Kiowas would follow the roaming buffalo and hunt, and most of Kansas was overrun with buffalo at that time, and the Kiowas were a nomadic tribe, so they followed the buffalo, and they had war parties and hunting parties that went out. I've heard of accounts where some parties would last, maybe they'd go in maybe a year or so, be gone that long. Everything they did, they got and took, from the land and traded, with other Indians and traders and whatnot. I would imagine they did a sweat lodge, which before the treaty signing, I would imagine they did a sweat lodge, which is a cleansing of your body, and they also would do a sweat if they went on a vision quest, more or less, and it's like you sweat all the poisons out of your body, and you sit in there and pray for guidance.
In October of 1867, approximately 5,000 representatives of the Arapaho, Apache, Kiowa, Cheyenne, and Comanche nations met United States government delegates to discuss the signing of a treaty that intended to bring peace to the area by relocating the Southern Plains tribes to reservations away from the Euro-American settlers. In the following decades, however, the agreements set forth in the treaty had been broken by the United States government.
They got together with the 5 tribes. They agreed to meet, and so where next to the Carrie Nation home is the old truck stop, and that is where the cavalry set up on the hill, and then the peace treaty, the signing itself, was just south of that.
They had to have water, but the reason they had to have water, because I was always amazed that I've read accounts where there was like between 3,000 and 5,000 horses that they brought with them. I guess when they went to a treaty, they all brought everything they owned, and they dressed in their finest when they went to meet with the generals and whatnot and talk over the accounts of the treaty.
And they weren't all there at the same time. They came at different times. And it wasn't signed by just 5 chiefs. It was signed, there were several chiefs in a tribe. And so they finally got the thing signed by all of them. And there was peace for a while, but it didn't last long. And that's the government's fault.
The Dawes Act had changed the allotment policy, and the tribes saw their territory reduced yet again. After the signing of the treaty and the relocation of the southern tribes of the plains, settlers began to move into the area and make lives for themselves. Frontiersman Derek Updegraff came to the area in 1873 and built a trading post. It wasn't long after that the town site for Medicine Lodge was laid out and communities started to take shape.
Well, there was people here in like 1871. Osage Indians were here. So there wasn't too many settlers, but there was a stockade built downtown for the protection of the Citizens Medicine Lodge. There was also one built like 12 miles north of Medicine Lodge. There was one at Sun City, actually. But it didn't last too long, but people would stay in there and play cards and dance and all that sort of thing. And then it wasn't incorporated until 1879. It became an official city. It is the early history, but people, I think they came here because of the water of the 2 rivers, the Medicine River and Elm Creek, and it was flat land to the east, and then Jip Hills to the west, and so we got a good variety. So it was a good spot, and we had good water and pretty good location. And they built the city, of course, on a hill, and then it just grew, with businesses.
Marcia Hoagland, owner of Red Dirt Jacks and Medicine Lodge, has made it her mission to find and preserve the last remaining monuments to the people who lived in the early days of Medicine Lodge and its surrounding communities.
Very passionate about the history of Barber County. To me, history is more than just names and dates and collections. It's about the people and their stories.
Fast forward to today, and Barber County is currently inhabited by approximately 4,000 people, with Medicine Lodge being the most populous city. Gypsum mining, ranching, and agriculture are the main industries in the region. The people here today honor the past of this region by hosting a peace treaty festival and pageant that attracts thousands of visitors. The event is held once every 3 to 5 years.
The treaty has a rich history here. There are families that go back 5 generations and maybe more in acting in the peace treaty. So it is a tradition here that is long held, and it is a capsule of the history of the area. Some of it is a little loosely interpreted, but it tells basically the story of the region and of the signing of the treaty with the five tribes. And it is quite a spectacle. Nobody in the state of Kansas should not have gone to the peace treaty at least once in their life.
You know, the covered wagons coming in and circling and people playing the fiddle and all that, and then the Indians, they're shooting at the settlers and what have you. Then in comes the cavalry. But there's Spanish dancers, there's prairie flowers, there's a Coronado expedition. They have a powwow and a rodeo. The Native Americans, you know, they do quite a show. I think they're going to do it out to the Peace Treaty grounds this year. There's, you know, controversy in respect with the fact that the government didn't keep any of the bargains they made in 1867, and so we're sitting here celebrating the signing of the peace treaty, but we didn't keep our word. So I still think it's a historic thing and worth doing. But yeah, I think they rewrote it a bit to try to be up with modern times.
For people interested in getting their feet on the ground in the Gypsum Hills, there's no better place to explore on foot than Gypsum Hills Trail Rides, also known as the Gant Larson Ranch. Nestled among massive buttes and canyons, this 3,300-acre ranch along the Medicine River offers hiking, camping, and horseback riding unlike anywhere else in Kansas. Robert Larson, the owner, has lived on this land his whole life and is passionate about sharing its rugged beauty with people that are eager to appreciate it.
My great-grandfather started this ranch in 1883. You know, we had a few hikers would come out here occasionally, but with the help of Nick, you know, we've gotten more and more hikers, and we really enjoy it. You know, we feel like that this ranch is capable of handling hikers and horseback riders both. And I have really enjoyed having the hikers come out. This is one thing the reason that we're still in business with the trail rides is we enjoy meeting new people and providing a place for them to go. Okay, a little bit of history behind Dix Peak. Back in the 1860s, a gentleman by the name of Uncle Dick Woodard was his name. He was a buffalo hunter. His camp where he stayed was just north of where Dix Peak was. And he would average killing between 1,200 and 1,800 head of buffalo a year in here. There's a knob over here in one of our south pastures. It's a really steep hill, and we often had people ride by that hill and think, well, that'd be kind of fun to climb with a horseback. And very few people have made it to the top of that, but how it got its name was my dad had a hired man that worked for him in the summertime, and he rode by that thing and he said, Bob, I'm going to ride to the top of that. My dad says, no, you can't. You cannot ride to the top of that. Well, he made it to the top, so that's how that got its name. And since then, there's probably been 6 or 8 people that have ridden to the top of that hill. It's very steep.
Land management and conservation is also on display in the Gypsum Hills, and the Alexander Ranch near Sun City is a perfect example of this. Winners of the 2019 Leopold Conservation Award, Brian and Ted Alexander have worked hard to remove invasive species of cedar from their land and coexist in harmony with the ecosystems on their 5,500-acre cattle operation. Beavers have been encouraged to return to the land, which has stimulated a thriving polyculture of plants and animals. With an attention to soil health, Brian Alexander has been able to create a regenerative habitat that is highly productive for his cattle. which he rotationally grazes across numerous pastures. Brian is also heavily involved in aiding his neighbors with controlled burns, which not only clears invasive species and promotes growth of native prairie grasses, but also helps prevent large-scale fires, like the huge wildfire of 2016 that plagued the area.
Yes, we had a wildfire come through here in 2016. It was named Anderson Creek Fire. I'm a rancher and I'm also a firefighter. So it was devastating in this country. When it came through our ranch, it burnt every acre of ground that we have, with the exception of about 120 acres.
And I went out to the Peachtree grounds and sat on a hill where I could watch the line of fire to see if it's going to come get us, because it looked like we were going to lose the town. But the wind changed, and it started going back south instead of north.
And we all said after that fire was over, we will never see one of these again. The very next year, we had one west of here, 50 miles, that was even larger than this one. So it's a wake-up call for ranchers, to be better stewards of the land, so these kind of wildfires don't happen ever again.
I feel like I've learned a lot from my experiences in Barber County. I discovered that I deeply yearn for wide open spaces and feel a calling to honor the men and women that walked those spaces before me. I'm very thankful to have discovered Barber County, and I encourage you all to take your own journey.
We've always loved the Gyp Hills.
I just think for a little town, we've got more to offer than a lot of towns as far as history goes. And
We like to go out there. We like to look at the hills around that area and just to travel and, see different things and wonder how it was. Imagine, nothing out there and people riding horses and hunting buffalo, how it was back then.
I want to lay awake in these ivory sheets. I want to know my aches in my newborn's dream. I want to stimulate these stone thoughts. I don't feel buried inside